Hey, I get a lot of questions. Being in my age with kids, my kids' age, I have a 5 and a 2 year old. Both of them are in private schools, and we live in New York. We live in a neighborhood where the schools aren't too good. The school budget in our neighborhood is massive, but the schools seem to be really, really bad. And I think what I read online from living in this community, a lot of the criticisms on the schools where I live is because a lot of the students are bilingual, Hispanic students, and Central American immigrants and South American immigrants. A good portion of kids from those families go to the public schools where I live, and those kids' first language is not English. And there's a big push a couple years ago to have bilingual teachers in the schools and bilingual assistants for some of these kids, but they blame those kids on the grades being low, and then the schools getting low scores, and then it's like a domino effect. Like one thing affects the other, and then all of a sudden you are in a school in a neighborhood, a zip code where the schools are like really bad, like twos and threes out of 10. A mile up the road from where I live in a fairly good neighborhood, but a mile up the road, where I live here, it's very diverse. I mentioned in one of my videos, very diverse. You have black families. It's diverse economically as well as the least diverse aspect of where I live is the types of people that live here, right? Where I live is mostly families. A lot of adults my age have young kids my age. So you see a lot of that where I live, more so than a single person who's like in her 20s or something like that, or single people looking for nightlife don't live where I live, basically. So you have, it's a similarity with the groups of people that live here. We all have young kids, we all like think about schools and think about the same similar things. But diversity is economics. We all work different places, we all different skin colors, different religions, different backgrounds, all melting pot here, right? A mile up the road, 2 miles, a mile and a half up the road is the next town up. 99% white, and the schools where I live goes from 2 out of 10s, 3 out of 10s, to 9 out of 10s, 8 out of 10s. It used to be 10 out of 10s, but now schools, when they rate schools and rate school zones, they look at diversity scores and they take a point off if there's a lack of diversity, both economically as well as racial diversity. If the schools don't have that, there's a score for that, and that takes a point or two off of that thing. But basically, without that, the schools a mile up the road from us is 10 out of 10. Based on academic assessments, right? Those kids all go to good colleges from that school over there. Kids where I live down here, I don't know where they end up, but I did live in here for a number of years. I find out a lot of kids, and I've seen this as an educator myself, where kids that go to schools in not bad, but low scoring districts tend to not want to go to college. There's this lack of eagerness to go to college. What kids down where I live, and I've seen kids grow up in this neighborhood, when they turn 16, 18, they want a car. They go to community college, either or trade, like automotive trade or something like that. And a lot of them, good kids, they do all right for themselves. One guy, he went to a plumbing school. A young kid, I knew him since he was like 9. I've lived there for a long time, and now he's 20, and he went to a plumbing trade school, and he makes a good amount of money doing that. He lives further down in towards the city, and he has a girlfriend, his own place, his own car. He's always wanted that car since he was a little kid. But he's doing all right for himself. With his, I think he's married. I'm not sure if he's married yet. But right, so we had a choice when we where we live now. We could move up a river and send our kids to public school, where my daughter will definitely be the only black kid in every class she is probably attending, and my son as well. My son he looks like he'll be an athlete. He's very athletic, so I know we would do probably well up in a neighborhood like that. But it's a concern for me because I feel like my kids would lose a bit of themselves, would gain academically and gain like financially in the future from going to schools like that, but they might lose a bit of themselves in the process of gaining something education wise and good. I think they would lose something of their culture and heritage, because we as parents, I'm not like I'm the least cultural dad you could think of. I'm a black guy, but I come from a diverse background of things I've done growing up. I'm not your typical black dad. I'm not your typical black person that you would meet in New York or where in America, basically. I have very colorful background in terms of my parents were well traveled, so I was well traveled. My parents were economically well off, so I grew up with a sense of privilege and a sense of my wife complains about it now, a sense of a sense that I could go anywhere and feel like I belong there, right? I could go a mile up the road with like a room full of white people and feel like I belong there because I grew up in situations like that where I was treated very well. So I have a trust for different environments where I could go into, but I grew up in a different era where it was a little different. And I'm also tougher, I think. From my generation, we grew up tougher, like because of we didn't have the privileges and the nice things that people have, the kids have today. So we could do that, right? We could send our kids to public schools here where they'll be mixed in a classroom with Latinos and black kids. Not really get a lot of academic growth or academic possibilities. There won't be as many possibilities academically in this neighborhood for my kids, but they'll have a sense of who they are real quick if they go to a public school here, or even in the city or in Brooklyn or something like that. So as a result, what we're doing now, we're stuck in limbo because my son is 2. He's in daycare pre-kindergarten, and the tuition between my 2 kids, it's like a lot of money. And then my daughter, who's 5, she applied for a lot of public schools. She got into all the schools she applied to, and we picked a school based on where we work in the city. And this was pre-pandemic, because we wanted my daughter to go to school where me and my wife work in Manhattan. So she goes to an elite private school in Manhattan, where I'm meeting celebrities on Zoom PTA meetings. It's like celebrities on Zoom PTA meetings, which is weird as a parent because they're like, how are we affording this, and I like it, and I feel, again, she's in a less diverse environment, but it's more inclusive, if that makes sense. It's not that we live in a neighborhood 90% white people, 99% white people, and we're the only black family in the neighborhood, and my kids are only black kids in the school. This is a little different where if you have money, your kids go to the school. So you have a diversity in that regard, but you don't have economic diversity, right? My daughter comes home and she wants to go skiing in the French Alps with her friends, or she wants to go to Aruba for the weekend with her friends, So I'm seeing that now, and we can't afford that. We don't have that kind of money. So it's like, we eventually want to move to a smaller community further up where we are now, and as you get, these communities get nicer and nicer, and what we could afford as our budget, as we save and save, what we could afford becomes, our options become wider, but the diversity of what we could afford just shrinks down. So the more money we can spend, the less diverse that place will be, if that makes sense. So eventually we want to move out of here and move to a big house, or a house that fits us, not a big house, a house that fits us in a nice school zone. But I realize nice neighborhoods with nice schools and good schools are not diverse, and it's hard. We want to stay in New York, it's just hard to find that. So right now we're doing a private school thing, and the private school is, when you add 2 kids in private school, it's more than a property tax and more than a mortgage on a $500,000 house in a nice neighborhood. It's way more than that. 2 kids in private schools, it's way more than that. So we're looking at it and we're like, oh, we could save money, but then we don't want to live someplace where, like, it's crazy. Like, one of my best friends bought a house across the river in New Jersey, close to New Jersey, and a beautiful house. He spent close to $1 million on the house. He wanted me, my best friend, we grew up together, our kids know each other, and he wanted me to move out there really bad. And, me and my wife, we looked around, we drove around the first time we were out there, and every lawn, this is like last year, 2020, every lawn was like a Trump 2020 flag, Trump 2020 flag. And we didn't get any dirty looks or anything like that. A car full of black people, black family, kids in the back, me and my wife. We didn't get dirty looks, but we felt like you feel his vibe that kind of, and this is summer of 2020. This is before most of the Black Lives rioting. This is before the election. So, but you felt back then, we felt like a sense of like, yeah, like if shit hits the fan, I don't want to be living between two Trump flags. You know what I'm saying? If things go down, I don't want to be living in a community where my kids go to school where all the kids and the parents at the table might be like, you know, saying the N word or saying things what they believe, rightfully so, freedom of speech. And this is a freedom of speech, freedom of firearms people, and they say what they want to say. And I want my kids exposed to that. You know, it's a question. Do you want my kids exposed to that? The other option is to stay where we are now, move, and where we are is very liberal, it's very democratic. Hillary Clinton lives, the Clintons live up a few miles up from us, so it's very like democratic, very blue, if you want to say. So, but still, there's some sort of you lose something in that regard. You gain academically for your kids, you gain financially, you gain their future is going to be set if they go to those schools, but it's a trade-off of being a black dad. I don't think it's discussed enough. I've seen a couple of articles in the New York Times about education and black Americans, and it's something I think about that my friend who's white now lives on the other side of the river, good schools for his daughter, where it's like, you look at me and him, we're identical, right? Salaries, religious, we're both Catholic. Everything's identical except for a skin color, and that one thing affects where he could live and where I'm like busting my head, me and my wife. We make enough money to live anywhere in America, but we can't. And it's not because of racism, it's because of what we want for our kids. You know, what it's weird how 20, 30 years ago it would have been, in my parents' generation, it would have been like, oh, we can't live there because of racism. You know, before then, my grandparents, oh, we can't live there because it's like they'll kill us. You know, now it's my generation. It's like, oh, we can't live there because my daughter will be the only black kid in that neighborhood, or you know, it's kind of, we won't fit in. You know, it's a weird, like how the racism is removed, the slavery is removed, the violence against people of color is removed, and still I have to think about where I have to live because, you know, we're not really free. It's weird. Anyway, so that's what it's like being a black dad in a situation where you could afford to live anywhere you want to live, but you kind of have to do the private school route because that's the only place where your kids will get cultural diversity. Not so much there will be zero economic diversity, right? I do want my daughter to like go to school with kids that don't make a lot of money, so she gets a sense of like, oh, there's other people not like my parents that need help, or I, you know, have to work with different people. So there's no economic diversity in private schools, but there's cultural diversity, if that makes sense. So it's like, and it's so much I'm thinking about my best friend on the other side of the river doesn't think about. You know, when you think about that, it's just very weird and very strange that it's 2021, and you know,